walking the dogs on the trails gets me a lot of attention. There aren't many people walking around with 3 dogs, sometimes all off leash. And people ask me all the time, how do you do it? How do you maintain these dogs? How do you keep them in line? They're so well behaved. Well, it boils down to trust. I trust that they're not going to act like idiots, and they trust that I'm not going to be an asshole. And so we have this nice negotiated experience, and they trust me. And I think men are a little bit like dogs in that respect. Once you earn their trust, it's very easy to control them. Women understand that. And some women will use that for nefarious reasons. They will take advantage of that trust, and they will use that man in ways that he never would have believed possible had he been told in advance that this was going to happen to him. Today, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about a viewer who I talked to about a month ago. Really great guy. He's a Marine. You know, he's a war veteran. And this poor guy has just been dragged through it. And I think this happens more often than most guys like to admit. Because I think it was a tough thing for him to talk about, because it's kind of embarrassing on a certain level, because it's beyond just simping a woman. It's submitting to a level that you know in your heart is not appropriate, but you feel like your back is against a wall and you do it anyway. So let's talk about it. This is Life 2.0. So I'm going to call this guy Joe. Like I said, he was in the Marines. He fought in, I think it was Iraq, could have been Afghanistan, but he got blown up, and he's disabled. Now his body looks like it's whole, but I don't think his mind is whole. I think that, you know, he left a part of his soul on that battlefield when he got blown up. I think there's some PTSD going on there. And there was some physical stuff as well. But anyway, he's disabled. Just to give you a perspective of what his life is like and what he's been through, so that you understand his mindset going into this. So he's about my height, like 5'7", 5'8". Not a super tall guy, kind of thick. You know, you can tell this is a pretty athletic guy, or he had been, especially when he was younger. Just your stereotypical jarhead, you know. I mean, he just had all those characteristics of a Marine. And he was telling me about this girl that he met about a decade ago. Beautiful girl, tall, like taller than him. Girl next door personality, but model looks. Easygoing, friendly, approachable. The two of them just hit it off right off the bat. They had a very intense, wild romance and got married. And it was kind of a shotgun marriage. I think she was pregnant, or she got pregnant right around the time of their marriage. But the baby miscarried. So they had this bonding experience around the miscarriage of this child. From his perspective, their relationship went beyond typical relationships. That it had a level of almost mysticism to it. That it was such a deep and strong and powerful connection. He felt like they were like two sides of the same coin in a lot of respects. And I can understand how a guy can feel like that, you know, and I'm not going to doubt him at all. This is his story, and I don't want to take anything away from it. But that was the way he felt about her, especially at the beginning of the relationship. Now, as often is the case, you know, in young marriage, things went a little sideways. You know, she got to be kind of crazy. She started taking drugs, drinking, breaking the law, doing things that he couldn't stand in his life. He set boundaries and she would cross them all the time, you know, and finally he said this has got to end, and they divorced. It was relatively amicable, but she left. She left town, she got in her car and drove across the country, and he didn't hear from her for a long time, for years. For years he didn't hear from her. And then I think he's living like in Tennessee or Kentucky, someplace like that, and he gets a call in the middle of the night, years later, has not heard a word from her for years. Middle of the night, she calls him up, desperate. She's homeless. She's addicted. She's strung out. She's thinking about suicide. I mean, she is at the end of her rope. And so Joe gets in his car and he drives to Colorado or someplace out west, you know, a huge, it was not convenient in any way, shape, or form. This was a huge undertaking to rescue her. I know how you guys like to joke, Captain Save-A-Ho, and you know, there's some of that in all of us, you know. There's definitely a little Captain Save-A-Ho in me. I've definitely got that thread that runs in me. I think maybe it's instinctual, but for Joe at that moment, it was more than just instinct. It was a flashback to all of those memories, to, you know, how much he loved her, and the miscarriage and the connection. And I'm sure she had been on his mind a lot over the years, you know. Anyway, so he rescues her, brings her home. Brings her home. That's what he said. I brought her home. And she sets up residency. Now he lives in a duplex. He owns a duplex. So he's got 2 houses connected. I think that's a up-down duplex. So he's on the ground floor. He put her upstairs. So he's not jumping right in to this relationship, into a romance with her. He's going to try to save her. He's going to try to bring her back around, get her off the drugs, get her back on her feet, and send her on her way. At least that's the plan. We'll call her Robin. Robin, still attractive, looking a lot thinner, definitely strung out, definitely into some kind of serious drugs. She only admitted to drinking and smoking pot and some relatively light stuff. But Joe, he suspected more. He suspected meth. He was suspecting hardcore drugs. She swore up and down that wasn't the case. They came to an agreement where she was going to clean her act up, get a job, start paying some rent, save some money, and get the fuck out of his life. That was the plan. That is not the way things went. Strange men started showing up around Joe's house. People he didn't recognize. People who did not look like your normal upstanding citizens from the neighborhood, you know? These people look shady. They look creepy. They look concerning. Joe's got guns in his house, you know? He's a Marine. He knows how to use them. So he starts prepping himself psychologically that maybe these guys mean her harm. Maybe she owes them money. Maybe they're chasing her down. Maybe she's screwed with them in the same way that she's screwed with him. So he asks her about him, and she just acts dumb. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know those guys. Anyway, one thing leads to another, and there's some kind of a dispute about her and these guys, and Joe does run them off, but it becomes very apparent that she's lying to him, and that there is more to this drug story than meets the eye. And it becomes apparent that perhaps she's been on the dark side of life, much darker than anything that he could have imagined, beyond just using meth, beyond just being an alcoholic. Like, there may have been some prostitution, there may have been something so dark that she couldn't even talk about it with him, because she seemed very, very mysterious in talking about where she had been for the last 5 or 6 years. And Joe was starting to worry that maybe he was getting in too deep. Maybe he was letting her back into his life. He was starting to see the writing on the wall. Then Joe started noticing money missing from around the house. Like, he used to have a little stash of cash that she knew about, and it disappeared. And that really rattled Joe. So with these guys hanging around with her there, he confronted her and asked her if she knew anything about it. And she blew it off and said, I don't know what you're talking about. Again, he's pushing down on the drugs, trying to figure out what exactly was going on with that. And she's swearing up and down, there's nothing too hard here. There's no meth. There's nothing like that involved in her lith. And then it happens. Joe goes up into her space, and he starts digging around, and he finds methamphetamine on his property. Now Joe, you know, like a lot of Marines, he's got tons of friends who are cops, you know. So he takes this stuff to the cops, and he says, hey, do me a solid and check this stuff out. And sure enough, they did, and there's all kinds of stuff in this. There's methamphetamine, there's cocaine, there's fentanyl, there's all kinds of stuff that she's got up there. And so Joe confronts her about it and says, you gotta go. You can't stay here, you gotta leave. And so She has a big emotional outbreak. She starts talking about killing herself again. She starts melting down. And Joe does a good job here. He stands his ground. He does not let her back into his life and sends her down the road. 6 months later, Joe starts getting text messages from her. And these text messages sound desperate. She's at the end of her rope again. She's going to take her own life. She doesn't know where she's going to go or what she's going to do. And Joe is doing his best to ignore her. He's doing his best not to do anything. But eventually, once again, he goes back and he plays Captain Save-A-Ho and he brings her home. Long story short, as you might guess, same thing happens, same outcome occurs. And they have a big blow up, a big fight. She hits the road again, driving across country. And then just a few months ago, she starts sending him text messages. And he should have blocked her. And I told him, you got to block this girl. You got to get her out of your life. This is going to continue happening for so long as you continue responding. She is using you as a backup plan for her life. And every time she gets into trouble, she's going to call you. I read through the last series of text messages, and they were the most manipulative, most, it was almost transparent that she was trying to control him. And from the responses that he gave, I could tell he was becoming a little more aware at this juncture in the relationship that she was using him. But nevertheless, I could tell there was still a lot of softness and compassion and love in his heart for her. And she knew it, and I could tell. She knew that he still loved her. She knew that she could control him. She knew she could always trust Joe to be there for her no matter what. And Joe believed that himself. And as a result, I believe that Joe is going to probably see a lot more of Robin than he ever hoped that he would. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to be critical of Joe in the comments, but here's the thing. Joe's a good man. There's no question about it. Joe's a good man. He doesn't lack self-respect. You know, there is a way of looking at this where you can see that Joe's behaviors here were honorable from his perspective. And she knew that he was a man of honor. He served his country. You know, he took a lot of pride in his affiliation with the Marine Corps. She knew this was a man that she could trust no matter what. She knew that he would never let her down, even though she knew that she could not trust herself. I think Joe could see to the essence of this relationship beyond the transactional nature of it. And he knew that she was manipulating him. She knew that she was taking advantage of him. He knew that she was abusing him. This was not a mystery to him. It was not a mystery. It was upsetting to him, and it was frustrating because there was a piece of him that still loved her. He wanted to ask me what he should do. How does he deal with this situation? Because there is a special connection that he feels with her. There is an underlying love that he feels that they both have. And he feels like it's his obligation, his responsibility, his job to make sure she doesn't die, to make sure that she's okay in the end. And I said, Joe, she's not the girl you married. The girl you married wasn't a drug addict. She wasn't a whore. She was the dream come true for you. That was a moment in time. That was a beautiful moment, and you guys had a wonderful time, and you had a wonderful connection. It's important to recognize that when time moves, everything changes. As humans, I think we like to lock things in place. We like to think that this is the way that is, because it gives us comfort to be able to identify it and to know it and to call it something, to put a label on it. But the truth of the matter is, nothing is like that in life. Everything is transient, everything is moving, everything is changing all the time, especially people. And Robin had changed a lot since Joe fell in love with her. And once I went through that with him, he started to understand that, yeah, there was nothing there anymore. This girl that was hooked on drugs and that was selling her body to get what she needed in life was not the girl that he had fallen in love with. She was no longer his responsibility. And Joe called it off. Joe cut her off, blocked her on his phone, and hopefully he's continued to keep that relationship at more than arm's length, as far away as possible. I think it's important to recognize that we all have our own journeys in life. It's hard to watch someone else's journey when you know it's going in a bad direction, especially when it's someone you care about. As a parent, I can tell you it's very difficult to watch your children struggle at different things, to see them running into roadblocks or coming into obstacles and not being able to overcome them for a while. But you just got to have faith that you raised them right and they're going to figure it out, and you give them a hand up and you do what you can to help them get through it. If they want it, if they want the help, if they're willing to change, if they're willing to do what's necessary to walk the path the right way. But when people take your assistance and then throw it back in your face because they don't want to change, they just want to take advantage of you, then you have to cut them off, no matter how much you love them. Because the only way they ever come to terms with their demons is by hitting rock bottom. They need to hit that ground where they have no other choice but to change. An addict is like that. An addict will not change under any circumstances until their life is at stake. They have no other choice. And even then, you can't be sure of it. You can't be absolutely sure of it. I made this video because I think there's a lot of guys out there that are a lot like Joe, who are honorable guys, who I wouldn't call them simps, and I wouldn't call Joe a simp, although he used that word to describe himself when we were talking. I don't think that's what he was doing there. I think he was behaving based on who he is. He was authentically being honorable and trying to save this girl because of their relationship, because of their connection. The mistake that Joe made was believing that she was still the same person that he knew from almost a decade earlier. She's not. She's absolutely not. Joe felt like he pled an oath to her on some level, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, whatever. And I would argue that that oath was broken when their relationship fell apart initially, when the marriage ended, and he did not owe her anything else. Being a man of honor and rescuing her once, I can kind of understand that. I can kind of get it. You get a call from an ex-lover and she's down and out, and she's desperate and she just wants a hand, and as a good guy, you're going to reach out and help her out. But yeah, that's it. One chance. That's it. And I think Joe has come to that understanding. But for you guys out there who are concerned about simping in situations like this, I understand it. And it's a tough one. It's a tough call. What's the difference between being a man of honor and being a simp? Getting sucked into a damsel in distress situation, because that's kind of what Joe got sucked into, a damsel in distress situation. The only difference is this damsel was someone he had been married to and all that. So it's a tough call. It really is. And my heart goes out to Joe. There's no absolutely right answer here, but to be extremely careful and to understand that women do see men as a life preserver. And if they come across a guy that they think is honorable, that they think they can trust, they will use him. They will use him. And you need to be aware of that. Don't fool yourself into thinking that this is turning into some kind of a romantic thing. When she's coming to you for help, when she's in that situation where she needs a hand up, this is not the time when you can start thinking that you're going to make a romantic connection with her. In fact, that's completely off the table. You cannot have a romantic connection with her under these circumstances, because you're at different levels. You're more powerful. You're in a position of advantage here, and you do not want to get into a relationship with a woman when you have all the advantages and she needs you, when she's desperate and she's using you to bail her out of a bad situation. Yeah, you can't start a relationship with a woman under those circumstances. This happens, I think, a lot more often than most guys want to admit. Joe was brave in admitting that he had gone through this to me, and I could tell it was a tough thing for him to talk about because he knew that he had been played. But working it out and understanding it and bouncing it off of someone else, I think really made a difference for him, because then from my perspective, I could tell him that he was being played, that she was not authentic, that she was not the same woman that he had fallen in love with, that he did not owe her anything, that he needed to preserve himself. And in fact, he needed to keep her away from him as much as possible, because her involvement in his life, I think I told him, if you continue this relationship with her, one day you're going to find yourself being bent over a police car with cuffs on your hands and being thrown into the back for something that you did not do. And that's what oftentimes happens to guys. You know, we take a bullet. We take the bullet for her because we're being that stand-up guy. Yeah, she is not an honorable person, and she does not deserve your honor. She does not deserve your protection. She does not deserve to be rescued. She's walking her path. She's made her choices. You just got to let it happen. All right, you guys, that's all I got for you. I certainly hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please like and subscribe. If you know someone who's going through something like this, maybe share this with them. Maybe it'll ring a bell for them. Maybe they'll recognize that they're under her spell and change direction. Anyway, until next time, stay healthy, and if you can, stay single.